All right. Hello. Welcome in. Welcome in. I see people popping in. I'm so excited that y'all are here with us. So today we are here to celebrate the release of Good Morning Love with Ashley M. Coleman, moderated by Pauleanna Reid. This conversation has been brought to you by several bookstores. I am Shanika Williams from Kindred Stories in Houston, Texas. This is also hosted by Solid State Bookstore, Cafe Con Libros, and Shelves Bookstore. So thank y'all so much for being here. I am so excited to see all of y'all who are popping in. I am going to give a quick introduction to Ashley and to Pauleanna, and then we are going to get started. So, Pauleanna Reid is going to, give me 1 second, guys. I'm missing something. So sorry. Alrighty, we are ready. So, Pauleanna Reid is a celebrity ghostwriter who helps high-profile leaders and doers turn their personal stories into powerful brand assets. She founded The Writer's Block, a full-service ghostwriting agency composed of a team of content ninjas responsible for some of the most talked about pop culture moments, books, and noteworthy speeches. She is a senior contributor at Forbes and Business Insider, where she reports on female leaders who are shaping the future. She has also penned her debut novel, Everything I Couldn't Tell My Mother, a loose adaptation of her own life story. Now, we are here to celebrate Ashley M. Coleman, who is the debut author for Good Morning Love. Ashley is a freelance writer and music executive from Philadelphia. Working in the music industry for over 10 years, she has also written for Essence, The Cut, Apartment Therapy, and Grammy.com, among others. In 2017, she launched a writing community for BIPOC writers entitled Permission to Write. So I am going to go ahead and welcome them on the screen. I am so excited to see y'all.
Hey.
I'm excited for this conversation.
Hey.
And I can't wait to see what you guys talk about. So congratulations again, Ashley. I really hope you guys have fun.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Hi, everyone. Ashley, so excited that we have a chance to connect to talk about your book, Good Morning Love. As you can see, I've been tearing up this book, and it was a pleasure to read, honestly. Like, I'm so proud of you. How do you feel?
I feel great. It's
Yeah.
it's tough. You work a really long time to put a book together. It is
Mhm.
not something that happens overnight. It's literally 5 years in the making, and so just to get to this point, I mean, it's almost like a little indescribable. So I'm trying to take it all in.
So, you've been a writer for several years, as long as we've known each other. But I want to know the backstory. Like, what was the culture in your home growing up around literature? Like, who exposed you to the world of writing and books, and the power that it holds?
Sure. So, all praises due to my mom, because she was absolutely the person who introduced me to literature. I mean, we would take trips to the library all the time, and like where I thought it was just this fun thing to do. As I got older, my mom was like, "Girl, that was something that was free, and I could take you and your brother, and it was free, and you could browse around, and you could get your own little books." And so I really took to that. I remember just being really young and getting my Sweet Valley High and like
Yes, I do remember
Babysitter's
those.
Club books, Goosebumps, all those books. And I just really enjoyed it. And I definitely found myself in a place where my mom always bought me journals. So that was like just a staple from being very young. I actually need to ask her like what was the onus behind that.
Yeah.
But she always would buy me journals. And so that was really the beginning of like, I still have some of those journals from very early on of just kind of like being very observant, writing about my day, writing about crushes, and writing little stories in those books. So those are really my earliest memories. And as I grew, my mom started to like actually give me her books to read. So
yeah.
I'm in the generation where we were way too young to be reading a lot of books that we were reading. We were like reading Terry McMillan, like
Omar
yes, like
Tyree.
all these really adult books, because now YA has such a wide variety of
Yeah.
stories, but we didn't have that, you know, growing up. And so she really started to share so many of her books with me as well.
I'd be surprised to know, like, at what point did you know that you were really good at this? I feel like creativity is a muscle that you build over time. What were those early signs, like, or life-defining moments where you realized that, like, I could actually make this a career?
Oh, you know what? That happened early on for me when I started writing artist bios. So, you know, I've been in and around music in like various different ways since I really went to college. Like my parents had a great love for music. My dad sings. He sings really well. I try to emulate him, but I did not get that gene of singing really well. And so music was always around. And so I really like studied recording and things like that when I was in college. And it was really being around artists who I always noticed they needed bios written, right? Like it was such a minimal thing. But when you have a natural knack for something, it comes a lot easier to you. And I remember one of the first bios that I wrote, it was for $50. And I felt like I was stealing money. I was like, you mean to tell me that people will pay me to write, like, you know, just a little bit about their life story? And so I feel like that was kind of the earliest moment of being like, okay, there's something to this, and really feeling empowered by that, because I think like so often we think we have to like grow up and get a job, and that's great. But it was like really eye-opening for me to realize that I had like gifts and talents that could make me money too. So I would never starve, you know what I mean? Because I felt like I had something that I could hustle.
You mentioned that your father had a musical background. How did music and culture influence Good Morning Love?
Oh man, it is music and culture, right? Like the book is so surrounded by that, even just the familial ties around music. So yeah, you know, my dad was a trumpet player when he was young. He sang in the all boys choir. So like music was just always a thing. Both of my parents love music. I grew up listening to like Brian McKnight and Rochelle Farrell and Boys to Men, like all that, like, you know, early 90s R&B. So I've always loved music. And really just working within the industry, one of the first things that I really realized was that everyone that was working in the music industry was a character. Like that was early on, because even when I first started foraying into blogging, one of my first blogs was like Music's Chess, a Pawn Story. That was the name of it.
Yeah.
It was really me just kind of on a blog spot, on a free blog spot, trying to
Blogspot, yes,
some of these like experiences that I was having in music. So Good Morning Love is really just like, you know, such a like amalgamation of like all those things really coming together, both my love for music growing up and then working in and around music for, you know, the better part of my adult life now at this point.
Yeah. I feel like the kids today will never know about Blogspot. That was a hidden treasure. So, you know, you were a blogger, you did bios, you've been a journalist for quite some time, but you also started a community called Permission to Write. I want to know, like, in what way are you helping women of color, Black women, give themselves permission to take leaps and take risks and pursue their dreams?
Sure. I think part of it is just telling them that because sometimes we just need to be reminded. So
Yeah.
it's literally in the like nomenclature. It's just like giving yourself permission to write. Like, I just want to tell you, like, once you get that part of it out of the way, you never know what is really accessible to you. Yeah, shout out to my PTW folks that are in the chat right now. But yeah, so, you know, that's really like the biggest hurdle oftentimes that we have to get over as writers, is just telling ourselves like we can do it, you know, because it's a very, you know, it can be a very exclusive space that a lot of us, specifically as people of color, don't really have access to. And so I think that's really like the baseline. And then after that, I think it's just sharing as vulnerably and as transparently as possible. I am a young girl from Logan in Philadelphia, and there is no kind of like natural path that would have seen me being a traditionally published author with, you know, all this promo and marketing and a billboard in Times Square and like all these, there's no kind of world where that just makes sense. And it's all like, you know, a collection of like being in the right place and, you know, in faith and kind of like God's plan for me. And so I think that when I share with that community as transparently as possible, they'll know that I'm not smarter than them. I'm not better, you know, looking or whatever the case may be, that I'm just disciplined and consistent and gave myself permission to try a thing. And I think that that really is the most empowering thing I could do to share with them.
One thing that we see in the book, when we're introduced to one of the main characters, Carly, is the relationship that she has with her mom and what the vision that her mom has for her life versus the vision that she has for her life. How do you give yourself permission to pursue your dreams when you have people who want to put you in a box, or people who want you to play it safe, or people who just, they don't see the vision that you have for yourself?
You know, I think it's interesting because I have the most supportive parents ever. And so I think that's the great thing about fiction, right? It's just like creating tension where you never really experienced it. You know, I think as soon as I told my dad that, you know, I had sold my book, he was like, well, where are the copies? And he trying to sell them out the trunk. And I'm like, listen, father, this is a big deal. It's, you know, it's a process of how this all comes together. And so I think, though, that when you are dealing with that, it's about just this idea of like, you're not really beholden to your parents, like you're really beholden to purpose. And for me, just as a bit more of a spiritual person, of what God has really called you to do. And I cannot see like human beings getting in the way of what I feel like I'm called to do at a greater level, at a greater stage. It's like, it's almost like bigger than what people think. And so to me, that is like the biggest thing behind it. And just knowing like your work is gonna like empower other people. I think that really accounts for when we're feeling afraid about pursuing our dreams and when we might be running into opposition from other people. I think it's keeping in mind like your life is not just about you. And so something as simple as writing a book, right? And it's romance, and you know, maybe it's not like a life-changing nonfiction book, like, but knowing like that means something, it's going to impact other people beyond you, is kind of helping you to get over the hurdle of like hurting someone's feelings about what you chose to do with your life.
Yeah, I love that. So you mentioned Philly was where you had your lived experiences. So what made you choose New York as the destination of choice? Like, what is your affiliation or your experience with the Big Apple? Talk to us a little bit about your love for New York.
Yeah, so I love how, you know, just I feel like there's so many things that happen a little bit by happenstance when you're writing a book. And so it wasn't really like this huge thought of like, you know, how intentional like Issa was about like her love to LA, you know? And it wasn't like as intentional, but my thought process behind it was, as a young music professional, New York was where you had to be, right? So Philadelphia, for those who, you know, might not really understand, is only 2 hours away from New York. It's a very easy Amtrak train ride. And back in the day when you didn't have Amtrak money, you could catch like a $20 bus. It was a little bit of a shady bus ride, I will tell you that. But you could get that $20 round trip. And so I spent a lot of time going back and forth to New York from Philly, being young and pursuing like a music career, because that's where the infrastructure is. Philadelphia is a place that has a lot of great talent for music, but it doesn't necessarily have the infrastructure to move your music forward. And so that's really how it happened for me. I have such like amazing friends that live in New York.
Magical things happen in New York. That's the thing.
Yes,
You don't know
yes.
unless you spent time there.
Yeah, and just I remember being like floored by the fact that like things were open till 4 a.m. in New York. I was like, this is crazy. Like, why am I in like Five Guys at 4 a.m. and the city, it feels so alive. There's like a pulse that happens when you're in the city. And so that's why it was like so cool to me that if I was gonna write a story really centered around music, I felt like New York was really the place for it to be.
Beautiful. So you mentioned that this book was 5 years in the making. What did the creative process look like? We see the end result. We see the beautiful cover. We live through the characters. But walk me through how you arrived at, number one, how did you decide that you wanted to write a love story versus, I mean, you could have written about anything in the world. And number two, what were some of the things that surprised you when writing this book?
Wow, sure. So shout out to the SNS team for that cover because it does really stand out.
Yeah, it does.
So thanks for that. But yeah, I mean, it was a long time in the making. I guess like one, writing a love story, it's like I'm really a sap, no matter, like I really try to put on a front like I'm a thug. And it's not the truth.
Right.
Inside my heart is mush. And so I really grew up just kind of like loving love stories, mostly around film. Funny enough, I felt like I didn't read a ton of romance as much as I like watched a ton of romance, and kind of wanted to translate some of those experiences into my craft of being a writer, right? So, that is my background. And so I just wanted to kind of like, I wanted to create some iconic fictional couple. Like the ones that I often think about, like I talk about Melanie and Derwin from The Game like they're real people. I love the comedy that they kind of had, like it wasn't always serious. They were really funny as a couple. I was always rooting for Lawrence, okay? Like no matter what was happening throughout the season and Insecure and how down we were when he was at Best Buy, I was like, that man gonna be something. Like it's gonna work out. And so I really wanted to recreate some of those experiences. I've been writing about love for a long time. And so it kind of was like a natural expression. But as for the process, that really looked like just like discipline. My very first draft, I wrote in like 30-minute increments, which I've talked about ad nauseum with my like PTW fam, about how you don't always need 6 hours, to be like prolific writer. You just need to be consistent and not have distractions, and you'd be surprised how much you can get done in 30 minutes. So that was really kind of just the chugging away at this first draft and getting a lot of feedback. I know that Abby is a part of this event with Shelves Bookstore. Abby was one of my very first beta readers.
Nice.
And she was an avid reader and gave me like very real feedback. And so working with people to kind of like really get it into shape, like to me, just consistency and discipline, and then also being open to feedback and not feeling like it's so precious, was a very important part of the process to me.
So I like what you said about 30-minute increments. Was there a particular part of the day? Like for me, like I love to pull all-nighters, right? When the world is sleeping, I love to be that creative in the night, working away at my computer. Did you have any sweet spots, or even any locations, like versus, your bedroom versus a coffee shop, like?
So I'm very much a work at a desk. I don't know how people get like real things done in bed. Occasionally I've had to do that when I don't feel like the greatest, but I'm very much like get up, put on clothes, like sit at the desk type of girl. shout out to you for the all-nighters, because I am the opposite. I could not, my brain does not function at max capacity, probably after about like 4 p.m., quite honestly. When it comes to writing, I could do this and be social and talk, but for me, it's first thing in the morning. So you know, I would get up like 6:30 in the morning. You know, I still work my full-time job, so that would normally start around 9. I've worked from home for a very long time, like pre-pandemic. So I was really able to take advantage of not having a commute, wake up early, get myself together, and just start plowing away. So for me, I'm very much a first thing in the morning kind of writer. That's really when I feel like it's the same thing as late at night, though. It's just where your brain works. Right. It's really quiet in the morning, just as much as it's quiet at night when people are all sleeping. But to me, it's something about when that sun rises. I haven't asked about life all day, and like it's the first thing I can do that really helps me flow.
Love it. Love it. One thing we share in common is that we understand process. We understand that, you know, things take time. Good things take time. And what I loved about this book is that we see Carly's evolution in the industry, and we see her dreams in full color. And we get to relate to her in a lot of ways because we see a young professional who wants something really bad, but she's faced with multiple challenges. My question is, like, why was it important to highlight this? Why was it important to highlight the fact that there's no such thing as an overnight success? And I know that you mentioned that you worked in the entertainment industry. How much of her experiences were pulled from your real life lived stories?
Yeah, I mean, those are really good questions. So one, I guess I'll start with, it was important to me to showcase kind of balance in it all, because I think that like sometimes we don't do as great a job with the balance, specifically like as millennials, you know, kind of like young professionals, we're just like after our thing. And I just think a lot about the duality of like survival and chasing dreams. I remember being an intern in college and, you know, still having to work. And it was so cool about the people who were able to just like take a lot more advantage of the internship because they didn't also have to have a job and go to school and be doing an internship. So to me, it was really about highlighting that experience, specifically with Carly being like a young person of color and kind of what those challenges really are when you're, you know, you don't have parents that can float you, you know, while you're figuring it out. You kind of have to survive and do that. And so for me, it was just about like showcasing a real character, like a fully fleshed out, well-rounded person who's just trying to like go after this thing. And then what was the second part of the question?
The second part of the question was, you know, you worked in entertainment, you know, how much of her experiences were pulled from real life scenarios?
Yeah, you know, it's hilarious because my husband was listening to the audiobook in the car the other day, like on our way to the event at the Salt Eaters. And it was interesting because he was spotting certain things that he understood about like my reality, you know what I mean? So it's like, to me as writers, you just kind of like put those things together. I don't care what you're writing. If somebody's writing fantasy, I promise you there are like bits of their real life, even if their characters are green and they're in a different world.
Yeah, it adds color to the writing too.
Yeah, I mean, you write what you know, right? Like that to me is important. And I think you make up a lot of stuff around it, you know? So something might start as kind of like, you know, real life experiences. And then the whole great part about fiction is literally that you can make things up. I think that's one of the fun parts about being able to write books, is that. And so, yeah, great writing is mining. All the time. I am mining all the time. When I meet people, when I hear conversations, when I see secondary characters in other stories, I think, well, you know, what would happen if their story was fleshed out, right? And not the main character. So yeah, I've mined all kinds of things over the years to include in the book.
I think all of us have had a Dawn in our life. Dawn is a very interesting character for me. I feel like I've had mentors and OGs and friends in my life who were, bits and pieces of Dawn. So Dawn is the founder of Garter Media, and she's Carly's boss. But I feel like in a lot of ways we see mentorship, we see tough love. So I noticed early on in the book she had two really important lessons. Lesson number one was you don't get what you deserve, you get what you negotiate. Lesson number two is that reputation is everything. I want to know, what are some of your non-negotiables or founding principles that have really helped set the foundation to your writing career?
I love that question. Well, you talked about real life, and those things are two very real life lessons that I've gotten from mentors. So, I would say that is, those two are really good ones. I don't know. For me, like the biggest thing is just like authenticity and transparency. I literally was just thinking today how like I cannot fake it. Like I'm not good at it. Like, I'm just kind of like, what you see is what you get, and to me, like that's been one of like the founding principles of how I've just carried myself. I think just like being hardworking, because you talked about that thing about like being an overnight success, and like that's just never, I just feel like nothing has ever been handed to me, and everything that I've ever achieved is because I worked towards it. And so, I think those things just being like front and center is just like hard work, and just a lot of authenticity and integrity, I think have been some of the main principles that have carried me, not just in my writing career, but through my life.
It's interesting that you say authenticity and integrity, because it's easy to say that, but oftentimes you will be challenged, right? And you are swimming with sharks, especially if you work in entertainment. The back of your book, in big bold letters, it says, "Fame always comes at a price." What have you had to pay along the way? How expensive has it been? In terms of like, some of the hardships that you've had to work through as a writer. I guess the conversation that I would like to open up is around barriers for writers of color and Black writers, right? Like when you have conversations with your peers, with your fellow sisters, your community, like what are some of the barriers that Black writers are experiencing, and in what ways do you want your body of work to influence or be a light?
To me, it's just information. Like so much about writing is shrouded in mystery. How do you get published? How do you get an agent? What happens when you sell a book? Like what is that process like? And so for me, it's just been about like cracking those things wide open. Like people perish for lack of knowledge, right? Like there's something to that, kind of whether you believe it from a spiritual place or just kind of like as a fact, right? Like without knowledge, you're in trouble. And so to me, that is kind of like the biggest boundary to cross. I've been so fortunate, with the opportunities that I've been able to get. And so I don't know, I guess I don't spend a lot of time thinking about barriers. I know that they're there and they're very and they're present. But I'm crazy enough to believe that
they don't apply to you.
That if I keep going, that if I listen, I'll say this because I think it's very important. When I was working on Good Morning Love, I had already self-published 2 non-fiction books that were kind of tied into my blog, right? Like, no big deal or big shuffle, but it was like I decided I wanted to do something. I did it on my own. And I remember finishing the manuscript to Good Morning Love and saying, you know what, I'm going to try to pitch this, right? And people probably thinking that was nuts. Like, girl, what do you think you're going to pitch this novel and where do you think it's going to go? And I just felt like if no one cares about this book, I know how to do it myself. And I will do it myself. And I've learned things about how to make it better. Like I knew I would need a marketing team. Like, I would need to put money aside for marketing. I knew that was going to be like something, or, I knew I was going to need a team around what I was trying to do. Those were the things that I had learned. And so for me, where those barriers are very real. I just believe in our collective power, you know, which is why it was important to me to like create a community around it. Cause, you know, just as much as, you know, I probably sold 100 books, that was still, you know, with non-publishing or whatever the case may be, or self-publishing or whatever the case may be, that was still people coming around me saying like, we believe in you, and sharing what I was doing and building me up, like, you know what I mean? And kind of like furthering my message. And like, that meant a lot to me at that level. So it's really been just about kind of like forging ahead and like ignoring the noise. And most people in creative fields, they understand like you have to be a little bit crazy. And I would say that for writers, just as well as like musicians, there's like 40,000 songs published on Spotify a day. What the heck makes you think your song is gonna push through, right? But people still create music because they have to be a little bit kind of like crazy enough to believe that like, if it's good, that like cream will rise to the top, even if it's not right away.
You talk about music, and when I think about music, I think about its healing power, right? I think about how it makes me feel. Let's talk about Black art, right? And when we say creative, I mean there's a spectrum of creativity, you know, that beautiful Black people produce every single day. Talk to me about, you know, how does Black art like heal amidst division? What has Black art done for you, right? You know, it could be books, it could be music, it could be paintings. Like, how has that helped fuel your process?
Yeah, I mean, I think specifically with books, I just love storytelling. Like, I love how books feel like you're sitting at someone's feet and like listening to what's happening. And so I think about authors like Diane McKinney Whetstone, who, if you're not familiar, she's written books like Tumbling, and Blues Dancing, and Leaving Cecil Street. And like reading those books and feeling like my stories mattered because they felt like my block, you know, and they felt like my aunties or my cousins. Like, I think so many of us are just like looking for opportunities to feel seen. And I think that's so much of the healing power in music. We hear a song that articulates so beautifully how we felt about something, and that is oftentimes what connects us so intensely to music. You know, if we feel vibrato, right? Like, you know, you want to feel that. Where you gonna put on? It's like when I go to the gym, I'm listening to Meek Mill. I'm listening to very music that sometimes I like shudder at sharing on Instagram because I'm like, man, this workout playlist is very ratchet. But it's like we put on music for different, you know, purposes, to put us in a space, you know, when we're feeling heartbreak, when we're feeling joyful, when we need to get through it. And I just feel like books are really the same way. You know, a lot of us didn't want to read heavy books when we were all going through the pandemic. It's like, give me the romance, give me the beach read. Like, I just want to feel good. I don't want to read anything heavy. And so I think that for me, that's such a big part of creating art, Black art in general, is just kind of like giving us a little bit of an escape, a little bit of entertainment.
When we were younger, when we were reading books we shouldn't have read, one thing I really appreciated about those books is that there was Black people in them, right? When you were reading Babysitter's Club or Goosebumps, you know what I mean? I think it's important to have women of color and Black women in stories, Black people in stories. Like, why do you feel like it's important? Historically, you know, our journey, our stories have been erased, our voice has been erased, right? Why do you think it's so important for us to have Black characters? And what does it do for the industry?
For sure. I think with anything, like, diversity just gives us more. It gives us more perspective. I think it goes the other way around too, right? Like, it's kind of like, you know, I think we all should have like more friends, you know. I went to like a Shabbat, like after moving out to like California, and I was amazed, right? Like, and I was so just like, I was so amazed. I was so like happy to be there. I was glad to like be invited and be welcomed into a tradition that was different from mine. And so I think like not only is it important to have Black stories for Black people, I think it's important for non-Black people to read Black stories. Sometimes we don't even think about some of the coded language that we use when like, people are like, well, I feel like this book is for a specific audience. Well, we never say that about stories that are like,
right,
written up from other specific audiences, right? Like, you know what I mean? So it's like, what is it about our experiences that is not considered universal? And so to me, that is really the importance. It's not just for ourselves to be seen, but for other people also to be able to take a look and a glimpse inside of something that is not their own. It's why we should be well versed across the board.
Girl, let's talk about Tao. Like when we were introduced to him, like, it was nice. It was refreshing. Like, who doesn't want to read about a fine man? Like, one thing I appreciate about their love journey is the banter, the humor, the cat and mouse early on. Writing humor, I've heard, I mean, I'm not there, but I've heard it could be challenging, like infusing humor into your writing. What role does humor play today? Why was it important for us to see those lighter moments between Carly and Tao?
Okay, so one, I think I'm funny. So I secretly think I'm funny.
Yeah.
And so I would have these moments that were like actually pretty natural to me. With like banter and things like that. So I love writing dialogue. I think for some people dialogue is difficult, where for me it's something that comes fairly naturally.
Nice.
And so I think as a writer you get so much into these characters kind of being real people.
Yeah.
And there was something naturally happening in my head, which makes me sound a little nuts, like of them kind of going back and forth.
Yeah. I loved it.
Yeah. So to me, like, comedy is fun. And like, I'm just a person who never takes myself too seriously. So I think that's just reflected in my writing. Like, I think it's funny to strip down the like sexy R&B star who's always so cool, and have these moments where like it's a little awkward, or
awkward.
like Carly having a moment and being like, wait, what underwear do I have on? Like all these things that are very like real life moments.
Him not getting what he wants, right? Because usually the popular guy gets all the girls that he wants. And I love that Carly was like, nah, I'm good. Like,
yeah, like, because that's very real. You meet people who like, and I get it, like this is their experience. If you have people throwing themselves at you all day, every day, I think it's really difficult. I think you get a little bit of a Superman complex, and it's human nature, right? And I try not to judge that too harshly, because it's like, I don't know, who would I be if people were throwing themselves at me all day? I don't know. But I think it was important to kind of showcase just another side of that. And I love how in the book you'll see how these layers kind of get peeled back. From the starting scene to the end, so much kind of like gets peeled back like an onion.
So you mentioned that you love romance. You mentioned your husband. I want to know, like, what is, from a married woman's perspective, what is the key to a relationship that lasts? Like, what did you want women or readers to take away from this love story without giving too much away?
Sure. Well, I feel like what people take away and what I think is a key might be a little bit different. Because I think like what a key to me of long-lasting relationship is just friendship. And like maybe that is a key that's happening in the book, and why it was important for me to have like funny moments or like letting down your guard moments, because it's like I think we get too wrapped up in the romance of what love is and not the reality of what it is. So you will get past these moments where you're just so flighty, and the butterflies and the hotness and all that stuff. like eventually that goes away. Like, even if you stay in shape, you know, good for
Mhm.
you. Or you're like, you know, physically attractive, or, you know, for the rest of your life, if that happens, there are going to be real moments. There are going to be job losses. There are going to be grief and human losses. There are going to be moments of sickness and all those things. And so if you don't have a foundation outside of like, I think you're cute, you think I'm cute,
Right.
I just think there's not much there. And I think the friendship really carries you through the moments, through all of those moments, right? When it gets really hard. Because I think sometimes we just relate to our friends a little bit different than we relate to our our romantic relationships.
Speaking of friends, I want to talk about friendship and deep dive a little bit. There's a theme within this book that I picked up really, really quickly: self-worth, self-esteem, self-love. We notice that Carly goes through a lot of things, challenges professionally and personally. She has these like quick moments, conversations with herself, and then she kind of buries herself in work, to kind of move past it. I want to know, like, what do you feel like is the first step towards, liberation for women, to free ourselves of putting uh, other things before we pay attention to ourselves and like work on ourselves?
Gosh, you know, that's just such a hard one. I feel like it's
Yeah.
such a complex question, because part of it is just like having to learn not to care so much. And it's like, how do you really teach somebody how to
Yeah.
do that? You know, it's so funny. I was just having a similar conversation about like, sometimes people feel like a need to have to like, oh, I cannot step out of the house like a certain way, like, you know,
Yeah.
without looking a
Yeah.
certain way. And like,
Mhm.
and that stress of that. And like, I've just never really felt that. And I think like part of it is taking like ourselves out of the gaze of men. Like, I just feel like so much kind of like relates to how we're seen by like the opposite sex. I mean, you know,
Right.
whether it's men or like whoever you're attracted to, right? Like, you know, or non-binary folks or whatever. Like, so much is kind of in the gaze of like folks who we are attracted to romantically, I feel like, is a better way to put it. And so I just taking some of that off, I think, is just such a huge hat. And I think just finding like your worth in something else that's not taking care of other people.
Mhm.
Because I think
Yeah.
as women, like sometimes we like pride ourselves too much on our ability to care for others.
Yeah.
And it's just kind of like, I liked about Carly how she was willing to kind of piss everybody off.
Mhm.
That was something so like cool to me about her as a character, was this kind of blind and, you know, chasing after her dream with kind of reckless abandon. And, you know, sometimes that might hurt people's feelings, but in the end of it, you can feel like you took care of yourself, you know, because
Yeah.
I don't know, if you're living for other people, I just feel like it's just a bad place to kind of be in.
Speaking of living for other people, I want to talk about connection. The people who hold you up, the people who support you. We're introduced to Carly's best friend. Do you have a best friend? What is that, or a tribe? Like, what does that even look like for you, and how did that influence this? A lot of people, I've noticed a lot of people don't have like a long time best friends.
Mm-hmm.
I've known mine. I mean, since I was in kindergarten, that's where we met, and we're still friends to this day. Do you have a best friend? And how have some of the girlfriends in your life held you up in challenging moments?
Yeah, so I absolutely have a best friend, you know, who actually, interestingly enough, is like expecting her first child, and so much with the book has kind of like
Yeah.
interfered with that. Like, you know what I mean? Of just trying to like
Yeah.
be present in that moment for her. And yeah, so you know, Carly's best friend is Talia, and I feel
Yep.
like one of the like she is like a quintessential piece of the story because she's like always getting Carly together, essentially. And so it was just like so important to me. I think just as much as we like saw a love story between Issa and Molly, just as much as we saw a love story between Lawrence and Issa, it like I like that dynamic of like kind of these two people that really feed you in different ways. And so, yeah, my best friend and I, we've known each other. It's funny. We always say, well, we didn't know each other as kids, but then I realized we met each other when we were like 18 and 19. And I was like, we were still kids, and just like, yeah, the long span of life, like we're still tripping out. Like I just visited with her and I was like, you're about to be somebody's mom. Like,
For
this
real.
is crazy. Like, like having those moments of like, you've just been with somebody from like the club to the crib, like, and then
It's
like
a good feeling. It's a good feeling.
Seeing that transition. So I love that about like Carly and Talia and how, even they didn't like each other at first, that was kind of like a funny part of the story to me. And just kind of what blossomed from that. But you need it. Like you need good friends, like whoever they are, it doesn't always have to be like one way. Or sometimes you have a few different friends that make up one best friend. Like sometimes just like in relationships, you can't always find it all in one person.
I would love to dive into some of the questions we have. Hey, Nicole. She says, have there been any real life musicians you've encountered who influenced your writing?
Ooh, yes. No, definitely. I've had, the privilege. I would never name drop. But I will just say that I have met multiple artists that I feel like have definitely influenced, the different characters. Like even the fact that Dylan is a musician too, right? Like Dylan is Carly's other working partner, right? She works together with Red, her producer, and Dylan, who's another artist. Like all these people are just composites of so many people I've met over the years. Yeah, for sure.
Another audience question is similar to the previous question. I'm curious how you decided when to mention real artists, Prince, Usher, etc., versus making them up. It was a fun read either way.
Yeah, so I think the difference with that to me in fiction is just like you never want to be trying to talk from a real person's perspective at all. So to me, mentioning real artists was being able to mention them in passing versus like making up an artist that's actually having an interaction with the characters and things like that. Because you would never, I don't even know the legalities of that, but you never would want to misconstrue it like you're making up, something, something about a real person. So for me, it was really trying to only mention real people in passing to kind of ground us in like, what kind of artist is Tao? Well, he would probably live in the space of a younger Usher, right? Like, what that would kind of look like. So I think it was important to have these kind of real elements that felt like anchors for people that were fictional. Because other than that, you kind of don't know where to put them. You never heard their music or, heard them speak. Right. So I think putting them in kind of like in comparison to other people, it just helps kind of ground the story a bit.
Love it. And another question came in. What's next for you? Are you working on any new projects?
I love when people ask this because you'd be like, do you know how long it took me to get here? And you ask me what's next. No, just joking. But no, yeah, I'm, I think like any writer, I'm underground, so nothing is like, nothing has a release date or it's coming anytime soon. But like best believe, like I am writing and plowing away, and hopefully going to have a next story somewhere somehow. The funny thing too about writing is like I literally have 3 open drafts. And I've kind of been jumping from one to one and not finishing any of them. So I think that's the other kind of thing when it comes to what you're working on next as well, is kind of like what thing do you want to do next? It's kind of hard to buckle down.
Will we see any overlap? Like, I love sometimes when I follow authors and they have multiple books, and sometimes you see a character from one book jump into another story. Like, do you envision any of your characters, you know, in future projects?
Well, what I love about romance is that
Mhm.
sometimes there's additional books in a series. So, let's if we tell a friend to buy Good Morning Love, who knows what the other opportunities might be. But yeah, I like that too. I think it's kind of cool when worlds either like intersect or they just kind of continue. I think romance is like a super cool space for that. Like I'm sure a lot of people have read like Jasmine
Yeah.
Guillory's like, series of books and things like that. So
Yeah.
I think those things are cool.
Do you think you'll stay within the romance lane, or do you think you will test and try like other genres?
So I think everything's a love story. And
Mm.
so whether something is, classically classified as romance or not, I think every story I write probably would have an element of like a love story, just because I think they're all about love. Even when we're watching Marvel movies, right? Like it's about superheroes, but they're love stories in various
Yeah.
different ways. And so for me, I really think that like when it comes to what I want to write about family, I want to write about music, and I want love and how those things show up. I think wouldn't stray like too far from
Yeah.
romance, but I'm interested in like literary fiction. I'm interested in like probably more romance stories. I'm not sure I'll ever write horror. I'm just not into it. Like, you know what I mean? So
Yeah.
it's like life is scary enough. I don't really want to like read about it. But so I think the possibilities are open, but I love writing about love, music, and family, and I think those three things would be a part of anything that's coming forward.
What will your downtime look like? Oftentimes when we see athletes, like they go hard for years, they make it to the Olympics, they reach the big goal, and then they kind of go underground for a little bit to restore their bodies. You've been working on this project for a really long time, and now, you're at the pinnacle, you're promoting, everyone loves it. What will your downtime, creative time, how will you re-energize or reimagine what those next projects will look like? What does that look like for you?
Downtime is a very interesting thing. And like I don't want to be that person, but it's like I really struggle with that, and that's
Yeah.
just being honest. I do know that I have some time coming up. Like if you follow me on Twitter, I've been like pining after this like 2 weeks I have off in July. Like, oh my goodness, I just need to get to this 2 weeks that I have off in July because in addition to promoting a book, like
Mhm.
we've been launching some really like hefty stuff at my
Mhm.
full-time job too. And it has been like an extremely exhausting period, but it's almost like my rest looks like I will be so happy during that 2 weeks to like create my own writing retreat and just be able to
Mm.
write from like 9 to 12 every day. And
Yeah.
for some people that doesn't look like rest, but to me, just being able to write and not have to think about 20 million other things like is rest to me. So
Love
I'm
it.
like looking forward to really being able to create that schedule for myself and like make some headway on some of my other projects that have been a little bit on the back burner with having to promote and do so many things for the book and trying to manage my work schedule as well. So I'm looking forward to what that looks like, and just hopefully some trips too somewhere in there. I love travel, I love a good
Yeah.
beach. So hopefully I'll be able to take some like real R&R as well at some point. But yeah, I'm looking forward to kind of just being able to create a writing schedule for myself and some of my downtime too.
You mentioned Twitter. I'm obsessed with LinkedIn and Twitter. And I know that, like, I don't know what writer is not on Twitter, to be honest, right? How has Twitter influenced, inspired? Like, listen, when I'm on Twitter, I be dying. Like, some of these tweets, like, I'm like, where do we come up with this stuff? Like, it's crazy. How has Twitter influenced your writing, if at all? Have you been able to expand your network through Twitter? How has social? Yeah, let's talk about social media a little bit and how that has either inspired or maybe you've had to step away and take breaks. Like, what has your relationship been like with social media?
Yeah, I love social media because I think that like I love the opportunity that it creates. Now it wastes a lot of our time and like it can get really dark, but like those things are like true. But I think social media is great because I honestly do not know how I would have some of the opportunities that I have without social media. It's like,
Yeah.
oh my goodness. Like, it has created, people have crept up in my DMs with like real life changing opportunities, because they were watching what I do. I love Twitter. I get to test my jokes there. I told you I think I'm funny. So, sometimes I'm like tweeting something. I'm like, this is going to kill him, and then like, it might only get one like, and then like the most random,
random tweets.
The most random tweet ever will like all of a sudden, you'll have like 10K retweets or whatever the case may be. So no, I mean I like Twitter. I like Twitter for the banter. I think as a writer, it just works for us. It's words, we're reading, we're having discourse. I love to like debate and talk and chat. So that's where I feel like Twitter really works for me. And I don't love Instagram as much because it's like, of course, it's visual. It's not like as much lame, but I still feel like it has absolutely like created such great opportunities for me. Just sharing like regular stuff. Sometimes writing doesn't always seem as sexy, and you're kind of like, what am I gonna make as content? It's not about my fashion. It's not about what shoes I wore. How can I like connect? And I think like I've found really cool ways to kind of like stay true to myself, not really be chasing anything else, and kind of build a community from that. And for that, I think like, social media is great. I think take breaks where you need to. I set the limits on my phone, so that even if I ignore the limit, I feel bad about it. You need reminders like that of like, go do something else, go outside, stop scrolling.
Yeah. And I really think that like for the writers that are in the room, before you tackle a book, it's good to exercise those muscles via social media, like master your captions, do Twitter threads, right? Like before you climb the highest mountain, like just take the baby steps. And so I think sometimes it definitely helps with that. My last question for you is, what are your highest hopes for the book? Talk to me about how you define success at this stage of your life and career.
Success was signing a contract with a traditional publisher. I think that was really like just like unbelievable. It's like I am living a dream like right here, right now. So I think that I'm living in the midst of so many like answered prayers. And so I try to really be grounded in that fact and not really have like too many expectations. I feel like I have like the secret dreams that I hope, what I mean? That, I try to like keep in perspective. But my highest hope for the book is really just that like people feel something, that when they read it, that they kind of like gush in the moments between Carly and Tal, because they're like that's what like makes me really happy about things I watch, and like I can't stop smiling. I'm just like grinning like a Cheshire cat, because something so cool is happening or something so romantic is happening. That's really what I hope. I mean, outside of that, like I would love to see somebody option Good Morning Love. I think, that's always there for a lot of us as novels. It's like, come on, let's see this visually. What would it look like? So, I feel like that's a big hope for me. But to me, success is just kind of like continuing to see it through, not giving up on it, like working it. You know what I mean? Like knowing that success takes time. I'm a debut author. People don't really know me in that space. You know what I mean? So just like showing up for every moment, I think is one of the most important things for me. Like hustle, like, that's just what it is. That's what I know. And so, I just want to see how far the book really goes. And I think success in my writing career would definitely be being able to write another one.
Love it.
Like writing the first is great, but I'm like, the feeling of that, it's like, I want to be able to do this again. And that I think would really be just success for me.
I think that is a fantastic way to end on that note. Good morning, love. Where can we find the book? Where can we find you? How can we keep up with your book tour dates?
Yes. So, follow me, Ashley M. Coleman _ are all my handles. I'm sorry about the underscore, but somebody on Twitter just will not give me my handle. If anybody can work on that, you let me know. AshleyMColeman.com is my website. You can keep up with everything that I'm doing there. I'm always going to share what's happening. I will be at ALA in DC this weekend. So if there's any librarians on or any folks that are just going to be in and around DC for ALA, please definitely stop in. I'll be doing a panel with Ebony Liddell, who is the author of Love Radio. I feel like she's like my label mate because we've been out here in these streets hustling together. So yeah, you could keep up with me there. And of course, like check out Permission to Write if you're also a writer. Like that is like a life's work of my heart. I love those girls with everything. Girls and guys, I'm sorry, I forget, but girls and guys that are a part of that community. And so yeah, definitely if you're a writer as well, it's a supportive place. We lift each other up. And folks are seeing that they're getting agents, they're working on their book proposals, they're selling books. So definitely come be a part of what we do there as well.
This was so much fun. Thank you so much, Ashley.
Thank you, Pauleanna.
Thank you both for being here. This conversation was amazing. There were so many moments where I was like literally cracking up in the background, and so many moments I was like, yeah, me too. Like, I'm not reading her. Like, why? Why do I want those images in my brain? So I'm glad to hear that none of your projects in the future will probably include horror. But thank you everyone for being here with us. If you haven't picked up your copy of Good Morning Love, please do so. Don't forget to check out all of the bookstores that collaborated to host tonight's events. It's in the chat box. And again, thank you so much, Ashley. Best of luck with everywhere that Good Morning Love is going to make it, because it's already on Times Square. So it's literally going to make it everywhere.
Oh, yes. Thank you so much.
Copy. Bye, everyone.
Bye.